feel like I need to kick my own ass a little bit. I'm gonna fucking bend over and fuck my own ass because I'm not God and I'm not Jesus, and I don't forgive myself for making this mistake. So I'm gonna make fun of myself to beat you to the punch. The the idea that I had, if I'm using the proper tense here, is that God came from nothing. And this is how my original theory went. And this is why I said in the previous conversation, monologue, that I had erred, that there was something I got wrong, that I failed in some way. Well, this is the failure, is that I originally started this theory with the presupposition, the assertion, the faith that there was such a thing as nothing, and that it did happen. And because it happened, then there was this paradox, which was indiscernibility. And then from that paradox, then everything else came to be, including God. And so I thought that that's what the theory was all about, was I'm going to expose how God was born. I'm going to prove God real. I'm going to shackle everyone to perfection. I'm going to force people to agree that, yes, there is a God. And I will prove exactly who God is and exactly what God wants, exactly when and how and where and why and what God wants. Boom. You're fucked. You belong to me now because I know all this stuff about God, and therefore I own you vicariously because God owns you, and I know who God is and you don't. So that makes you my possession. And that's what the entire theory was first all about. So, does that then not prove that I'm the Antichrist? Yeah, it kind of. Yeah, because how do you commit the abomination of desolation? Now let's keep in mind what Jesus said. What did Jesus say about the temple? He said, if you destroy this temple, in 3 days I will raise it up. And the Jews were confounded because they did not realize that Jesus' temple was his body. And lo and behold, what happened later? Well, Jesus was put on the cross, he died, and then he was resurrected 3 days later. So then how the hell does that happen? Well, if Jesus' body is the temple, and what is a temple? A temple is a place of worship. It's got an altar upon which you kneel in humility because you recognize God as above you. You don't commit the abomination of desolation and claim that you yourself are God, that you're your own God. When you claim that there is no God, you're claiming that you're God. First of all, you'd have to be God himself to know there isn't one. It takes one to know one. You'd have to be God to know if there is a God or not. There's no way of objectively proving or disproving it because God isn't an object. Or if God is an object, that's by your own arbitrary definition, at which point I can query why you made that definition. Because it clearly goes against what Jesus taught. So, when we go to that good old-fashioned Bible, what did Jesus say in the Bible? He says, if you were to raise this temple down to the ground, in 3 days, I will raise it back up. So then what the fuck does that have to do with me? Well, what I did was I reduced God to nothing. I gave God no room left to exist within by claiming that everything in existence fell within the boundaries of my theory. Now that's where I committed my error, and that's what was so arrogant about my original thesis, is that I thought that if I described how you can't derive any conclusion from nothing, and then therefore you must conclude indiscernibility, that's a paradox, because you can't draw any conclusion from nothing, not even the conclusion that you can't draw any conclusion. When I say you can't draw any conclusion from nothing, that itself is a conclusion, and it's derived from nothing. And so it's a paradox. And so is anything else that you place adjacent to nothing. It's not possible to say how something came from nothing. Because if you juxtapose nothing with something, what the fuck are you going to fill that gap with? That's infinite. You're talking about the difference between being and nothing. Sartre wrote an entire book about it. All he had to say is, nothing is not. Or possibly, nothing borrows its being from being. It doesn't have any being of itself. In other words, nothing cannot happen. It cannot exist. It cannot commit the act of being, because there is no it to commit the act of being. It itself is not a self. It's a paradox. It's a self-refuting, self-annihilating, self-destroying paradox. Devil, who invented all the lies. Huh, interesting. So, I, like the devil, said that nothing was somehow a thing, or somehow it happened, or somehow it had some substance, that I could say it and refer to it and yet not destroy it, and that I could discern that it had an indiscernible nature. But that's not true, because that's still drawing a conclusion from nothing, and I can't do that. I can't ascertain the truthfulness of any conclusion drawn with no premise. And you can't encapsulate nothing within a premise, because we can't ever be certain as to whether or not that premise is true. Because if I say that nothing is true, then depending on which odd or even number of times I recur that rule or algorithm, I will have an oscillating answer of either that's true or that's false, depending on how many times I run it arbitrarily, whether or not it's odd or even. If it's odd, it's false. If it's even, it's true. Why? Because we're talking about negation. So when we negate negation, we get a double negation, which makes whatever statement that we're making true, or at the very least unaltered. If we say then that there's only one negation, then that automatically makes it false, because it's negating. So then it's not a presence. And what is true is present. What is false is not. What is false is absent. It's not here. You don't ever find evidence of error. What you find is evidence of someone committing an error. But like numbers, you don't ever find an error. What you find is someone made an error of judgment, someone made the wrong decision, someone contradicted themselves in speech, someone made a mistake, someone misspelled something, or they misconstrued something, or they committed some logical fallacy. But you don't find the error. You find the person, and you find the act of committing the error, and you find the evidence of having committed the act, but you don't find the error itself. In the same way that you discover the value of the number, but you don't ever discover the number itself. You discover its value based upon its relative nature to other numbers. When I subtract the number 3 from the number 4, I get positive 1. That only tells me about the relation between the number 3 and the number 4 and the number 1. It doesn't tell me anything about what the number 3 is, or the number 4 is, or the number 1 is. However, given the fact that the number 1 is absolute, I do know that that is a totality. It's all of one thing. So when I put all the parts together and I collect all the parts into one thing, it being 1 makes it whole. Not a fraction, not a part, because that's in between 0 and 1. And not greater than itself towards infinity, because that's greater than 1. But simply 1. 1 of whatever it is. So if I collect 5 apples into a table, and I place them on the table in some arrangement, I can say that there's one group of 5 apples, with each of those 5 apples being one part. And you can't make an apple into a part of an apple. It isn't 5 parts of an apple, it's 5 apples as part of one collection of apples. So in that way, 1 is distinct, yet again. But the numbers 3 and 4, we don't know anything about those numbers. All we know is that they're somewhere in between 1 and infinity, and they're not in between 0 and 1. Now, there is, of course, the fraction 3/4, but that's not to be found past the number 1 toward infinity. That's to be found before the number 1 towards 0. Completely different direction, completely different space, completely different area. So the point of that then is if I am to say that Jesus, how did I start this? I'm trying to remember. If I say that I know these things, then I'm saying it can't be the case that there's an alternative. If I say that there is no alternative to what I'm saying, and I include God in it, or any other subjective thing, then I'm committing a grave injustice, because I'm saying that the subjective is actually relative, and that's the same grievous error as saying that a subject is an object. It can't be an object. It can't be an object of knowledge. It can't have its relation known for certain. Its absolute value of its relation is dependent upon how it relates to God, and with God being absolute, it gives us an indiscernible error. We run across that brick wall again. I cannot ever ascertain the nature of my own soul. I can never ascertain if I'm going to hell or if I'm going to heaven. I can't ascertain that for myself, and I can't ascertain that for you or anyone else. So the only one that I believe that could, that was a human, was Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus Christ. He's the only human that I believe could ascertain the absolute value of your soul. And ironically, he valued all of our souls equally, as far as I can tell. He sat with lepers. He did everything that he could for tax collect. What was this? Was it Mark or Matthew? Was a tax collector himself, is one of the Jesus's apostles. One of his apostles was John the Baptist, who was, by some accounts, crazy, because he's going on about the end of the fucking world. We still have yet to see it, John. Hopefully he's wrong, and the end of the world is not just around the corner, but maybe he was saying something in parable, probably not, but maybe it's the case that the end of the world is individualized. Everybody's world ends when they die. That's for sure. The whole world collapses. I can tell you that from first-person personal experience. I've almost died at least 3 times, and I can tell you, every time I've almost died, the entire world collapses into this present moment. What am I doing right now? Right here, right now. That's what matters. When you are dying, you're not going to have any room for anything else unless you believe in God. And you know what got me through it? I can tell you, here's a little story. Since I can't remember what I was originally creating this video for, I'll tell you a little story. And what it is it's a story of me almost dying So what happened is I was on the street and I saw this dude, another homeless guy, and somehow we got on to smoking a bowl together. So he offered me his pipe, and I was like, no, I'm good on that, because the last time that somebody gave me their pipe, it was laced with meth, and that was fun. But I didn't know that I was smoking meth, so I had a wee little panic attack when I first did that. That was, like a year before that. But I remember doing it, and I was like, no, I'm good. I don't want to smoke out of your pipe. God only knows what's in there. Which was the right choice, but unfortunately, I gave him my pipe, and I loaded it with pot, and then he decided that he was going to put some black shit on the top of it, which apparently ended up being fentanyl. I don't know how the fuck this dude survived smoking this shit, but he did. And he hands it to me, and I'm like, no, I don't want it. And then he cashes the bowl out, he finishes it out, and he scrapes it out perfectly clean. And I was like, whoa, okay, cool, thank you. Okay, now I'll load it with some normal pot. And I did, and we smoked that, and it was fine. And then I go to the homeless shelter, and I take the last hit, and I cash out the bowl. And sure enough, I get a vast wave of fentanyl high. And I knew it was fentanyl because I've almost died on fentanyl 3 times. That was one of them, and I had almost died on it 2 other times. I knew it was fentanyl. And I knew as soon as I took the hit that I was going to die. There was no fucking way, because I was higher on that than I had ever been on any other drug. So I knew I was going to die. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to die. And so, I'm talking with God. And he says, don't scream. Don't tell anyone. This is it was put to me like it was a pact or like some kind of a test. Like, I'm going to test your faith kind of a thing. No, it wasn't God. It was the Sams. But I thought it was God. And so I'm just telling you my subjective experience of what happened to me. And so, talking to God, God says, don't say a word. Don't say anything to anyone. Don't scream. Don't say anything. Just go through everything like everything's normal. Don't say a word. Just go through the chow line, just like everybody else is going through the chow line. You don't tell anybody, hey, by the way, I just took a hit of something. I don't know what it was, and I'm pretty sure it was fentanyl, and I might be dying. Can you give me some Narcan? Don't say that. And I didn't. And I went through the whole chow line, and I sat down, and I was eating, and I was actually relatively calm. I was freaking out because I thought I was dying, but I was relatively calm. And then, lo and behold, of course, like I already knew was going to happen, about half an hour in, it starts up, because fentanyl peaks. When you first take a hit, it'll be like a little bit. And then it peaks. It goes higher and higher and higher without you smoking anything. It just goes higher and higher and higher and higher. And then after an hour, it's finally at the tip of its peak. Half an hour in, you're about halfway up. It's just starting to build up momentum. So half an hour in, and I can't even fucking sit up anymore because I'm ODing on fentanyl at half an hour in. So, you had given it an hour, I would have died. I consumed enough fentanyl to have killed me. Just based off the resin hit that the dude, after he got done scraping everything out of the pipe, was at the bottom of the pipe, underneath the bowl. So there's a bowl, yeah, but there's a bowl and it's got a little hole in it in the bottom of the bowl. Like, it's a cone shape. And then you've got the hole that goes through there so you can take a hit. It actually goes into the pipe. And just beneath that bowl, there's the bottom of the pipe. Well, at the bottom of the pipe, there was enough resin from the fentanyl that even though I loaded a pure, clean bowl of pot, the resin of fentanyl from the time that dude had smoked it through and cashed the bowl out was enough to kill me. And so, like I said, I don't know how the fuck he survived that. I guess it's because he smoked it all the time, and he must have, because he took fat rips of it, and he didn't die. Took multiple hits of it, not just resin, it itself, and it was a lot of it. It's like, god damn. But anyway, so I had apparently ingested fentanyl because of the fucking resin from this dude taking a hit of it off my pipe. And I didn't know that was enough to kill you. I just figured, you know, if anything, it'll give me a nice little kick because it's just a trace. It's nothing compared to what he was doing. So it must be fine. Well, I OD'd half an hour in and I fall out of my chair. I can't sit up anymore. Fell out of it. I didn't drop backwards. I didn't make myself go into that position. I just fell because I literally physically could not hold myself up anymore because I was under the throes of fentanyl and I was ODing. So about a minute passes and I'm on the floor and I'm like, okay, I'm going to yell. I don't care what God said. And I was like, I'm on fentanyl. I'm ODing on fentanyl. Somebody get, help. Because I've seen this before where the homeless people will fall out. It happens about once a week. And, it's regular. About once a week, they'll say, man down, and, somebody will fall over. And it's usually an older guy. But sometimes it's a younger one that's on fentanyl. And they'll fall out, and then the first thing that they do is they check to see, is this person drunk or are they on fentanyl? Because if they're drunk, well, you just leave them there and they're fine. If they're on fentanyl, then you got to elicit Narcan. You got to administer Narcan. And so they do that, and I come back to my senses, and I'm shaking and shit. And during this time, then it's all about the code. It's like, well, you better put your feet inside the line. You better not cross that line. Even though it had nothing to do with what my intentions were, I was fucking dying. I wasn't about to try to go rape some dude or chick or kill somebody or whatever the fuck the code says that my digital self is doing. I was only focused on the here and now in the present moment. And yet I was so terrified of the SAMs at that time. I thought it was God judging me based upon this code that I followed the code religiously. And I made absolutely certain that my body wasn't out of line with where it should be at. And I did it out of pure fear. And after I came down from it, I was like, that's really soul-crushingly stupid that I would think that God would judge my soul based upon what my body is doing, whether or not my foot is inside or crossing the physical, grout in the tiling of the floor. He doesn't care about that. He cares about where my soul is. But in my panic, that's where I went. And so that stuck with me too, that I'm not on the right side of God, because that's the Pharisee, Sadducee way of looking at the world. God is going to judge me not based on my heart, but based on my body, based off of what I objectively do, the objective arrangement that I place this body into, because it's his body. Well, when you take that view, it's so difficult to live. It's just like, every breath that I take could be an affront to God, because maybe I didn't take it at the right time. Maybe I took it too deeply. Maybe I didn't take it deeply enough. And on and on and on and on. And so it's impossible to really comply with. Well, in addition to that, it's not really true to my soul. It's not really true to myself. And so then I don't feel like it's really a valid judgment. It's just something I have to do because I'm being held hostage by a tyrannical overlord. Well, that is the type of mentality that I developed because of my panic. And that panic is because I didn't believe that I was on the right side of God. And that is because I had so many religious experiences before that of God telling me that I was in the wrong. And again, this was all the SAMs doing this to me, but I didn't know that at the time. Hailstorms, getting stuck out in the rain at 33 degrees outside where hypothermia is imminent. Death is just around the fucking corner. No tent, just a blanket that gets soggy ass wet because it's raining, but it's 33 degrees outside. It's just 1 degree above freezing, just barely warm enough for it to be rain, soaking through the blankets, soaking through my jacket. I could have died. But somehow I survived that, and on and on and on. And so many of these things had happened to me that I was like in a panic at that time. Couldn't handle it. And I'm still recovering from it. I have serious scars. I'm reserving taking a hit of pot right now because I'm afraid that I'm going to go into a panic attack over it because of all the PTSD that I've had from ODing on fentanyl. Because it always happened when I didn't expect it. If it had happened when I expected it, then it would be different because I'd feel like I could control it. But it happened when I didn't expect it. And so I'm like in a permanent state of vigilance now because it wasn't anything that I did. It was just stuff that I didn't realize at the time. I was too trusting or too ignorant. Like the first time that I OD'd on fentanyl was because Raimundo, the homeless guy that I knew from Junction that used to come around at my old place on Lombardi Lane in Junktown, he gave me fentanyl but didn't tell me what it was. And I had gotten other things from him before and it was always fine. So I just trusted it and I swallowed it. It was like a pill or some kind of thing. And I, drank some beer along with it, and then I snorted a little bump of coke, and that's when things got really fucked up, and I OD'd, and that was my first time ODing on fentanyl, although I didn't know it at the time. And the second time was when I was homeless out in Denver, about, I'd say, less than a month after that. I was picking through joints on the ground because I had run out of pot. And I didn't think anything of it because I just thought, oh, it's a joint. It's from the dispensary, so of course it's not going to be laced. And I took 5 hits off of it before I realized before I realized how high I really was. And then I was like, no, 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 no. This is not just pot. This could have something else in it. It's legit laced. And that was the second time I OD'd on fentanyl. And then this last time that I just told you about in the homeless shelter where I took a hit and it had resin at the bottom of the pipe that I didn't even realize at the time would have affected things. But fentanyl is so super potent because I've done heroin and that's fine. You can't. I mean, people OD on heroin, yeah, but they always OD on heroin because they shot it up, or they did like a ton of it. It was a shit ton. Like you have to go hard to OD on fentanyl. I mean, heroin. But to OD on fentanyl, you basically just have to look at the shit. It's so fucking potent that like you take a resin hit off somebody else's shit after it's gone, and that can kill you. I mean, it's like, what the fuck is this shit? So I OD'd on the shit 3 times without even trying, without even wanting anything to do with fentanyl, because either someone had given it to me and not told me what it was, thanks Raimundo, or somebody laced their joint with it and I didn't expect that, thanks me, I guess, because you don't pick up shit off the ground and smoke it. That should be common sense, but I just decided, fuck it, why not? And I OD'd on fentanyl because of it, because somebody had laced their shit with fentanyl. And thank God I survived, because I didn't even have a phone to call 911 for it. But like I said, I've almost died 3 times, and every single time that I've almost died, it was from fentanyl. And every single time that I've almost died, I was very stuck in the moment. Like, this is what's happening to me right here, right now. Not a mild sense of detachment, not an absorption into an all-loving being, not anything like that, no light at the end of the tunnel or any of that stuff. It was just a present moment awareness of what's happening to my body right here in this moment. And that's what gripped me, and that's what my whole world consisted of. Just shrunk everything down to what is happening right now. So, and I mean, that sounds logical to me. It sounds like what would happen to any being that's almost dying or in the presence of death, that they're going to do that they're going to focus on what they're doing right then and there so they can avoid it, hopefully, or make some adjustment or something like that. But in any case, that's what happened. And I don't know why I told you all that.